Hello, everyone. This is AP. You're listening to The Uncomfortable Truth with AP and Chatty. And I know a lot of you guys have short attention spans. So hold on real quick. Let me tell you what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the book of Ecclesiastes. I hope I pronounced that right. Before we go any further, I would like to remind you that this is a podcast, so you can stop and pick up where you left off as you please. Have you just gone through life where maybe you hit a bump in the road, like maybe everything is going fine in your life, and then maybe you make a bad decision, or something comes up, maybe something that just disrupts your life in general and kind of throws things off course, and it makes you reflect. Maybe you even go through other emotions, like maybe you're upset, angry. Maybe things have just been going great. Like I said, maybe you got a promotion at work. Maybe you met a partner in life, and now you're going through the happiness of all that, and then all of a sudden, right, all of a sudden something happens. It kind of derails that path, and it has you thinking, and it has you feeling lots of emotions, and sometimes we can get lost a little bit in that, and we often start to feel a lot of things depending on what it is. It could be regret, it could be anger. Sometimes you get that whiny, right? You get the little bit of complaining in you. Sometimes like I said, emotionally, maybe you're just broken right now because maybe you did something that really disappoints people that you care about. Maybe you were like not drinking anymore because you were an alcoholic, or felt like maybe your life was getting out of control, and now you slipped back into this, or you had a bad moment where you went out and started drinking, and maybe some things happened that kind of, most pleasant things that could happen, and maybe you fought with a loved one or something, and now you're kind of like a little bit lost, a little bit hurt, and you're wondering, how do I get back on track? And sometimes these things can linger, and you start to wonder, like, what does this all mean? Like, what does life mean? Why are we here? Welcome to the Informator.net. Guys, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to like this video. If it's helpful to you and you find it entertaining, please share it. Thank you. Am I doing anything that's worthwhile in my life? Am I accomplishing anything that's going to better myself? Is anyone even going to remember anything I'm doing? Like, do I have a purpose? Right? Everybody kind of goes through these little cycles, and if you're feeling that right now, maybe you kind of got onto this video, and I'm gonna, not everyone is a Christian. Some people are in the wanting to be a Christian. Some people just can't stand Christians, period. And if you're one of those, you probably already skipped. You don't want to hear anything that I have to say, and that's fine. But the way I want to speak to you today is not as just a Christian, but as just a person that's gone through my own trials and tribulation. So if that interests you, I hope you stick around, because we're gonna dive into this book in the Bible that I read 3 times last night and studied it as best I could. I had a little help from AI and some of the bumps in the roads that maybe I had an idea what it was, but I need a little bit more help and clarification. So I'm gonna kind of go through this book, and you can follow me with some of the stuff in it, and let's see how you see this book. So not only are you going to get my interpretations, um, but maybe I get you interested in wanting to pick up this book, open it up, and kind of go through it yourself. Like I said, I had to go through it 3 times because it's not easy to kind of understand at first. And I've mentioned this before. Like, if you want a relationship with God, you have to really care. You can't just read something like you can't read the Bible like a magazine or a novel. If you really want to understand God, you actually have to pause. You have to think deeply in the verses that are there, to kind of get all the understandings that are there for you, and you'll kind of debate this stuff in your head, and then eventually the light bulb will turn on, and you'll feel like you have it, and most likely you have, because that's God's way of communicating with you. That's his way of saying, you got it, you understand it now, and then you move on. So, like I said, I read this book 3 times, and uh, something said, you know what? There's probably some people out there that would like to hear this because this really pertains to life in general. Because we're not always in a good state of mind. Even as a Christian, Christians sin like everybody else. There's nobody perfect on this planet. We we find ourselves in situations from time to time. Like I said, and not only that, there's always this misconception that you can't be a Christian and at the same time, um, do bad things, which is totally wrong. If most Christians understand that they do a lot of sinning, and that's why we try to get closer to God because there probably was a time in our life where we just try to make sense of it all. We because we couldn't do it on our own. Like what's going on with my life, and you look for some type of guidance. And whenever you talk to the wise people, supposed wise people around you, sometimes they can't really give you the answers that you're looking for, and so, a lot of us turn to God. And when you turn to God, He gives you these answers that nobody else really can. And it really hits you deep inside. And a lot of times it goes to your soul. And that's a lot of reasons why we Christians believe in God so much because it's a feeling that we can't describe to the non-believer, but it's something that gravitates us. Just gravitates our soul to those words in that Bible. So, like I said, why did I even pick up this book? I've mentioned before I've read my Bible, and now I go back and forth different parts of the Bible depending on what I'm looking for. But I found myself recently into a little bit of a dark state of mind, just kind of like I said, questioning what am I doing? Like what is this all about? And it happens from time to time, even for Christians. So that's kind of what happened to me. So I picked up this book kind of randomly, and I've read it before, but for some reason it didn't stick to me the way it did this time. And it's a short book, so I read it 3 times because I really wanted to get that understanding. So without further ado, if you're interested, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to tell you some. The first things I want to do is talk about some definitions because, especially in the Old Testament, and depending on what Bible you're reading, whether you're reading the King James version or another one, a more up to date, cleaner language version, because usually that's what they do when they reinterpret these Bibles. What they're really doing is trying to give you more modern words and make it easier for you to understand. Because if you read the King James version, not everyone's going to understand that. Though I would tell you, to me personally, that is the best Bible. But even I, at times, struggle with some of the language there. So I'll kind of switch from here back and forth to kind of find a Bible that's a little bit more clear on that. Then I'll go back to the King James version and kind of make sure nothing's been changed. That's just something I do. Not saying you have to do it. But anyways, there's a few definitions I want to talk about. One of those is vanity, because in the book of Escalates, if I'm saying it correctly, there's a few words that you'll come across quite often, and one is vanity. So the vanity we know is usually with your own looks, right? Someone that's self-absorbed, but that's not how they mean it in the Old Testament. So when you see that word, if you come on that word, it means like vapor, breath, mist. Something that's like emptiness, a fleetiness, something that goes away quickly. So when you hear the word vanity, it means like a short time, just depending on how the sentence go, but that's how you could pretty much put it. Vanity in this book is going to mean something that doesn't last very long. And then you'll come across the word evil. Now the word evil, we know it as just evil. Like that's an evil thing you're doing. You're committing murder. That's evil. That's an evil act. That's in this book, evil is used as that, but it's also used as like injustice, calamity, tragedy, brokenness, suffering, any one of those kind of things. Almost to the extent of a stumbling block as well. So those are really good to understand because they're going to keep coming up, and you're going to want to understand what you're reading here. So let's get into it. So the first thing that happens is we come across uh, Ecclesiastes 1 2. And the first thing you see is vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So that already sets the tone. So in here, we're looking at it as like a short time, a short time of short times, says the preacher. A short time of short times, all is short time, or all is something that doesn't last. So that's how we're interpreting that, right? So that's the way it comes out, and it's kind of just starts to set up these things that we go through. So as I was reading, the one of the first things that came to me, one of the things I kind of like, what does this kind of mean right here? And that was 3:11 in this book, and it says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in their hearts, yet so that man can't find out the work that God has done from the beginning even to the end." So when I came across that, you know what? It weirdly to say, like, this isn't your, I'm not a preacher or any of that. So understand, I just want to tell you and be truthful what I thought. For some reason, when I came across that, I actually thought about like scientists. I thought about how, they try to figure everything out, and they're not gonna be able to, not in their lifetime, at least. And I know it means much more than that, but like I said, that was one of the interpretations I got because I was recently kind of in a debate with some people that only believe in science and leave God out of it. So I just thought it was interesting that I came upon that line because that's what that line is pretty much saying, is that we have a limited time on this earth, and as much as you study and try to learn everything that God did, you're just not going to have the time to do it. So, and this is part of that theme that things are just, you know, futile. How we view our lives on this planet. A lot of times we put so much emphasis on trying to learn and figure everything out, and then next thing you know, your life has passed you by. Like, were those things really that important? And that's a lot about what this book is about, because as I said, as I started out with, how sometimes we kind of figure out, we get to that point where we're like, what is our purpose in life, right? Because we're doing projects, we go to work, we work hard, we do all these things that we feel are good and stuff, but at the same time, a lot of the things we're doing give you this short-term happiness, and then it kind of just goes away. Like, people that are say for instance, people that you may know, or like in these rap videos you watch, right, in your time you'll see people partying it up, and they're having a lot of, like, say, promiscuous sex and those type of things. And though those things may be fun, for a short time, you know, they don't last. They don't give you any everlasting peace or anything. It just becomes this circle of um kind of this circle of way of doing things that you do, and it's actually damaging to you and damaging to your soul, because you keep doing these things, you kind of lose your way, and you don't really get, like, life has so much to offer, but by doing things like that you just want to please your flesh, right? Whether it be drugs, partying, all those type of things, making money so you can live this lavish lifestyle. All those things are temporary happiness, and then you'll find yourself a lot of times in these situations when you're by yourself, like, what is it all about? Like, it's getting old. This shit is getting old. What is it all about? And that's this book is trying to elaborate on those things. So let's go a little bit forward. So this is AI's response to that. And like I said, if you read it, let me read it to you again. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in their hearts, yet so that man can find out the work that God has done from the beginning even to the end. So the meaning here is God's timing is perfect, and while He has placed a longing for eternity in the human heart, we cannot fully grasp His plans. It's a call to trust God's design even when we don't understand. So you see that right now, right? Like all these billionaires, they want to, like, live forever because they want to get the answers to everything in the world, and they're going to die, and they're never going to get those answers. And maybe from an outside perspective, you may look at that and say, yeah, well, hey, they left their mark on the world. Maybe they left some good information for the next guy, or so forth. But often you don't really know how they saw it. You don't know, by the time they're about to die, do they feel like, did I waste my life? Was I searching so hard for this answer that I kind of neglected my children, neglected my wife, and maybe I could have did so much more, so much good, and I kind of just got very, um I wanted to get the answer to my question, and I kind of just forgot about everything else. And so, like, bear with me, because, like I said, I'm not trying to preach here. I'm just telling you what I read and what I came across, and hopefully, it's entertaining enough for you that you stick around. Make sure to give me a follow and a like, please. I would really appreciate it. So, the next passage that I came to that kind of halted me a little bit was Ecclesiastes. I want to pronounce this right. Ecclesiastes. I think it's Ecclesiastes. There you go. Ecclesiastes 5:10. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This is also vanity. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This is also vanity. So this is also like meaningless. That's the way that I'm taking this vanity. Meaningless. It's short lived and it's meaningless. Like you're wanting money, you're wanting a lot of money, you want it to increase. So your life, if you're living life for money and those type of things, it's the wrong way to live. So as you can see, this book is already forming kind of like it's kind of coming together about life. Like, are you living for the right things? So, what I get out of this one is this: wealth cannot truly satisfy. The more one has, the more one desires. This is the part of Solomon's broader point that material gain is fleeting and unfulfilling. Um, Remember, this is written by Solomon. And if you don't know who Solomon is King David's son. And one of the things he asked for at a young age, what his gift that he wanted from God was the gift of wisdom and understanding. And God was very pleased with that. So this is all Solomon's writing, but he has the wisdom of God. So when you're listening to him, it's as if you're hearing it from God because God is who gave him all this. Though you'll start to see Solomon is also a man. So though he has the wisdom of God, his flesh at times will lead him the wrong way. And this is what makes the Bible so real to a lot of people because we today and through the centuries have dealt with this. The flesh is always going to take us away from things that really do matter. Like if you do have a lot of faith in God, there's going to be those times of weakness because that's the problem. Living on this planet, our flesh is always going to want to take us away because the flesh has a different fulfillment that it wants, and that isn't the same as the spirit that's inside of you. So from time to time, we fail, and then so we'll go to 5:16, and this also is a grievous evil that in all points as he came, so shall he go. And what profit does he have who labors for the wind? Basically, that's like saying, if you're living to just make money, there's nothing there to profit. Like your profit is not the money itself, but what you get or gain from your life experiences. So gaining money, there's no experience there. You're not really gaining any knowledge or wisdom. So going after money, if that's your goal in life is to collect money, it's going to leave you with nothing at the end. There is no profit in it. It's like chasing the wind because uh, you don't know where the wind comes from and where it goes, and that statement actually holds true today because scientists don't even know where wind comes from. It's just there. We don't know what it is, and we don't know when it comes, where it's going, and that's pretty much what it's saying there. So, to give you the meaning that AI helps put forth is you come into this world with nothing and leave the same way. Laboring for material things is like chasing the wind. It leaves no eternal value. So, AI being the kind of helping you with your biblical teaching here, basically like Bible school, right? That it came out with pretty much the meaning that I had. So, and that's what's good. So, I would suggest if you're going to read these books, read them yourself, read them a couple of times, dwell on them, think about it, let God give you the answers. And then after that, you can bring an AI system in if you want or whatever and kind of see where you're at, how close you were, because AI will pull from what scholars believe and all that because it doesn't have a belief of its own. It'll pull that information out and you can see how close you were. And this is really good. It's a good practice because first of all, you're trying it yourself and you're trying to get God's word from Him. And then after that, after you try, do your best and see if God gives it to you, gives you the key to that knowledge. After that happens, then you can go with AI and see if there's anything you missed. Maybe there's some things He'll add to it, or maybe He just clarifies what you already know. Either way, I think it's a good practice. So the next one that I got to that I like, I like this one. I'm studying this one. I really want to know what's going on here. That would be 7:1 through 2, and this one goes: a good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of death better than the day of one's birth. For that is the end of all men, and the living should take this to heart. So this one's kind of weird because you're like, what do you mean? The day of death is better than one's birth. What does that mean? For that is the end of all men, and the living should take this to heart. Well, like, what does this mean? To me, what you kind of get from that is a good name is better than fine perfume. So, what you do in life, others are going to see what you're doing. So, your name should mean a lot to you. Have respect for your own name. If you say you're going to do things, always try to come through. Try not to be a liar. Try to be honest. Try to what you want to do is you want people to see you in good stature because that's going to be the last things they remember you. So if you pass away and die, that's the stuff they're going to remember. They don't, you could be rich, you could be this and be that, but who cares? It's not like you're going to take that with you. So what people will remember about you that are left over is they're going to say, were you a good man? Were you a good person or a good woman? Were you a good wife? Were you a good husband? Those are the kind of things that should matter to you. And so this saying here about better than the day of one's birth is because when you're born, there's nothing said about you. Nobody knows what you're going to be when you're born. You could be a serial killer, you could be a criminal. You don't even have a record yet when you're born. But when you die, you do have that. Your story is complete, it's finished. And whatever you left on this planet, as far as your the way people know you, your legacy of how people know you and your character, that is the end of your story. So everyone's going to know about you, but in the beginning, nobody knows anything. You're just a blank slate. You could grow up to be the most evilest person in the world. You could be the smartest. Who knows? But that's what it's kind of relaying here. So let's see what Chatty has to say about that. He put down character and legacy matter more than luxury. Death brings perspective and should cause the living to reflect on how they live. See, there you go. And that's another thing. So Chatty mentions pretty much what I did, and then he has this little extra, which is death brings perspective and should cause the living to reflect on how they live. So, whenever you go to a funeral, a lot of times this is what happens. You start to think of that person that passed away, and then you actually start to look at your own life. Because I don't know if you've been to a funeral, but I have been to a few, and the one of the things you start to think about is how life is fragile and how very unexpected things can happen. And so people start to think about their death, like, man, what happens when I die? Am I going to leave enough money for my family to take care of me, or am I gonna, leave people with not enough where they can't even bury me, or proper burial, or however you wish to have done to you after you pass, whether it be cremation or burial. So you start to think of these type of things, and that's the thing about death. So in your own life, if you die, you want people to remember you as something, of a good person. Hopefully that's something you want. And the second thing is, if you're going to the funeral, if people are going to think about their own past, or how they've been living in their own life and going forward. So those are the two things that passage kind of relates to you. So the next one is 7:13 through 17. It goes something like this. Let's see. Here it is. Consider the work of God. In the day of prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider. Um, Here, what it's talking about is, you're going to have your good days. You're going to have times where, maybe it's a perfect day to you. You're happy. No, nothing and the drama scale is raised, and you're just having a good day. Maybe a good day at work. You come home, you have a good meal, you go to sleep. Maybe you get to say, "Hey, mom, I love you." Call on the phone, and good conversation, and the day ends. Or your best friend, or whatever. Maybe you go to a wedding and somebody gets married. It's a great day, great celebration. You go home. Next day, you wake up. It continues. So all that really is saying is, you know, consider those good times, soak in those good times, but at the same time, there is going to be bad days. Okay, so In this book, it often refers to the sun rising and the darkness, and it'll compare the two, and it'll say basically the days that the sun is up are like good days, but there's also darkness in a day. And that also, not only is it because it's dark because the sun is down, but there's darkness in our days to come that we're going to start to have issues at points in our life. That's just the way it is. You're going to have those type, and how you answer, how you respond to those dark times really matters. It shapes you, it shapes people around you, and it actually has repercussions for your future, because there are many, right, that have bad days and they don't handle it very well, and now they're it changes their life for the worse. Maybe a loved one passes away, right? I hate to keep bringing up these kind of things, but the book kind of mentions these things quite a bit. But maybe it doesn't always have to be death. It could be a loss of a job, right? Let's say you have a really good job, the best job you've ever had. You're making six figures, seven figures, whatever it is that is great to you. And then next thing you know, you lose this job because who knows, maybe one day you were partying too much and you got a DUI and now you lost it all, right? There's some really bad days like that. But how are you going to handle that? Do you have that bad day and it make you worse? Like, oh man, my life sucks now, and now you're going to start drinking, and now you're going to start maybe experimenting with drugs and things you didn't do before. Like, is it going to take you to more of a downfall? And who knows where this skid ends, right? Like, do you end up homeless one day because you let it just take a hold of you and take you down to the the bottom of the river, wherever that ends? Or are you going to cut that off? Are you going to, like, this is difficult, I'm in a very difficult situation, but I got to stop it here, I got to learn from that mistake, and I got to pick up the pieces of my life. And so this book also reminds you of that, like, you're going to have bad times, but you're also going to have good times. I often like to tell people that um sometimes when a tribulation happens to you, it's for the best. You may not see it at that time, but as time goes on in your life, you'll end up somewhere better. It happens quite often. You'll end up having a family one day. Maybe if something happens to you young, you end up having a family, have kids. You have to think about time in itself. Time and choices. Like, you may look back and be like, oh, you know what? If this didn't happen to me, I wouldn't have met so and so, and I wouldn't have these children that I love so much today. And that's how life is. Life has this balancing act, and it's always going to take you back and forth. But most of the time, when you talk to somebody that's older than you or has been through some things, a lot of times they don't regret some of the things that happened, even if they were bad back in their life. Not if they learned from them, because they're in a better spot. The ones that don't learn from their mistakes are the ones that actually go worse. So what it's saying here is just learn from your mistakes. Whenever something bad happens, understand that it's happening and understand that it will pass. But don't allow it to control your life. Make good judgments, think of God. If you're not a Christian, or if you're a Christian, get into your Bible, learn these things about God. He'll help you. It's not going to be instant. Nothing is ever instant in life, but things will get better. You gotta maneuver, and you gotta hold yourself there and just not let yourself fall into the darkness. So here's what Chatty said. He put, God allows both good and bad days. Don't assume life's outcomes reveal his favor or displeasure. Walk in humility and avoid extremes. So basically, what Chatty is saying here, the part I didn't mention, which is don't assume life's outcomes reveal his favor or displeasure. Because, as a Christian, a lot of times you'll feel like, what's going on here? Why is God punishing me? And it's not that way. It's not that he likes you less. A lot of times you need these things to happen. You need calamity in your life, because calamity is what humbles you. And hopefully you have that resilience of God in you, and you'll come back as a better person. But sometimes we just need to be put back into perspective, because when things are too good, we get very loose with our morals, and especially how we treat our faith. We kind of just go down the wrong path from time to time, and you kind of need to be reset. So God just does this thing where he just puts you back in perspective. He lines you back up. He gets you thinking about him, gets you thinking about yourself. And it's, believe it or not, it's a blessing. It is not a bad thing at all. The next one actually happens to do more with, like, say, women, and which is funny because, see, Solomon. that was his biggest weakness. He liked wives, a lot of wives, a lot of foreign wives, kind of like his dad, but he was very into the foreign women, and it actually led him astray at some point in his reign as king because his foreign wives would bring their gods over, and that's when he started committing idolatry, worshiping other gods, and it kind of, it hurt his kingship. But so this right here, this part, he actually talks about women and people, and then you can see his own reflection in it, and that is 17:26 to 29. I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares. Basically, there's women out there that have hearts that are always scheming and always looking to gain something. They're conniving. A lot of women are conniving. Not all women. There's a lot of men that are bad. So let's not make this a thing where, oh, see, look at it's only women. No, 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 men, women, and not to mention men often are fools because if I were to continue in that area, there is actually a part that says that when there's a woman that's very close to God, like men don't want her. They're more their hearts want to always go with women that are beautiful and are scheming. The sexy, beautiful woman, the woman that shows her body and stuff. That's what the guy gets attracted to, and those more often than not are the worst women to be attracted to because they lead you down the wrong path. Where the woman that's with God or loves God, you don't want to be with a woman like that a lot of times, especially when you're young. Men don't want to go with those type of women because, well, I mean, they're too good, and this just goes to show how backwards thinking we are as men, especially when we're young. And this I would say is probably the same for women because you do see women do that a lot too, especially when they're young. They seem to be attracted to the bad boy instead of the good guy. And later in life, as we wisen up, we actually change and we want the better person. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes people never change and they just keep going in and out of these bad relationships. So that's what this kind of means there. He's just talking about women and how it's not a good thing to get with these kind of women, and men need to be wiser about that. So Chatty here, he says a cautionary reflection on the spiritual danger of temptations and relational entanglement. Let me read that again more clearly. A cautionary reflection on the spiritual danger of temptation and relational entanglement. Solomon laments being led astray and concludes that while God made man upright, people have corrupted themselves with schemes, which basically that is true, right? People have a way of sabotaging their own spirit in their own life because, as I said before, the flesh is really weak. And this is why prayer, reading your Bible, uh, really filling your mind with God as much as you can helps out because, I kind of mentioned this in one of my earlier videos where I basically say the reprobate mind, which I think we're in the time of the reprobate right now. They don't really think of God, they think of sinning all day long, where, someone that loves God or is close to God, you're constantly thinking of God. Now, it doesn't mean you're doing the right things. You may still go out to a bar, you may still have some beer, you may go to that craps table, right? You may go to the roulette table, who knows what you're doing? But the point is that you think of God more often throughout the day, and the hope is that you just don't go too far. We'll kind of get into a little bit into that later if I remember, because a lot of times I say that and I don't get back into it. But let's move on. 8:11 through 14 kind of talks about. Here's just a little preview because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily. Basically, in those verses, it talks about how bad people, or should I say, criminals, people that do wicked things, they do evil things, right? They commit these crimes, and sometimes justice is not served quickly. So, if you're a righteous person or a person that maybe the crime was done against, or you're witnessing a crime like on TV when you see it in court, sometimes these bad people get off, or sometimes they don't even get caught. And so basically what this is trying to say is that justice doesn't always come instantly, which it doesn't. It takes time. God's judgment takes time. So sometimes there's this false security, even for wicked people. Wicked people are doing these bad things, and because there isn't no instant justice, they keep on doing these wicked things or these bad things or committing crimes because Nothing has stopped them. So they think they can keep on living this way of life because nothing is stopping them from going that path. So in those verses, it tries to let you know, like, if you're a righteous person, like, hey, like, don't worry about it. Just keep on trying to live your life the way you can, and do what you got to do, because sometimes rewards at the same time take time. So if you're living your life through God, don't expect an instant reward, but know that if you're living your life correctly, you'll get your rewards in due time. Good fortune usually happens for you if you're doing good things. It's just, we can break that down to the most basics of things. If you're not driving ever drunk, you can almost expect to never get pulled over for drunken driving. And if somebody does pull you over and thinks you're drunk because maybe you swerved, you'll most likely get off because you're not. But if you're drinking and driving all the time, you may not get caught for 500 times, and then one time you're going to get caught, and when you do, it's going to be a hefty fine and maybe even some jail time. So see, it's just the way life works. Like, whether it be justice or reward, things take time. They don't always happen instantly. So, you just try not to worry about it. Now, if you're evil or you're committing crimes, you should stop. That's what you should do. But in this part of the Bible, it's just letting you know, as a righteous man, like, don't worry about it, because justice will happen to the people that are doing bad things. And sometimes maybe it never happens, because that's another part of this book that it lets you know, like, good things don't always happen to good people. And sometimes you see people that are not very good people, and they have all the money and they have all the houses, and they seem to have a great life. At least that's what you think, and it's not usually the case. But the point being is saying that sometimes bad things actually happen to good people, and vice versa. God has a way of doing things, and Solomon explains it, like, don't always, you know dwell or wonder why. Like, God has a way of doing things, and there's a purpose. And sometimes we can't really see the purpose, but there is a purpose. And this is to help you cope with these things, because if you're living a good life, you're trying to do all the right things, but something happens, like, and I hate to say it, so God forbid, but like something like you lose a kid, to cancer, like, those are some really heartbreaking, life derailment type things. And I can only say I'm blessed that those things haven't happened to me, and for the people that has happened to, and I pray for them. Very sorry that that happens to you, but that does happen to good people, and you hope that if they have a lot of faith, that they'll get through it, and somehow it's hard to say, because what are you going to say? Their life turns out better. It's not necessarily that, but sometimes good things can happen from your responses. Like, I always like to give that example of, was it John Walsh, the guy that did America's Most Wanted, because his child was kidnapped and murdered. And look what he did. He started that show. He started an organization to capture these type of criminals. So though his life has been altered, and I'm sure like nothing would ever replace that. Like, he wants to see his kid grow up, and all those things. So I'm not going to tell you that it's better for him in that way personally, but on the other side of that, how many families did he help? He helped get rid of all these criminals that could just damage numerous lives. So like I said, so maybe for him that it'll never be fulfilled. Like I said, you love your child, you want to see your child grow up, and it's a heartbreaking thing. But there is the positive that he helped a lot of people. He did the best he can for the situation that he was put in. So, Chatty's response to that, to those 291 210 is, death comes for everyone, good or evil. Life is short and uncertain, so live joyfully, work hard, and embrace each day as a gift from God. And that's a really good point. The gift from God, which is, that is also a theme of this book, and that's why I say, if you're going through some tough times, this is such a great book to read. Especially with, like I said, the tools we have today to help you understand more. If you don't have that instant phone call you can make to your pastor, but that is the theme. The theme is this: is that if you asking yourself, what is the purpose of your life? If you're not living for God, everything you're doing is pretty fruitless. It's pretty that's like I said, what vanity is said in here, which is meaningless or short lived. Like it means nothing because one of the things Solomon talks about is how you'll be forgotten. Like people are forgotten after so much time. It's just a fact. Like even historical people you remember, like Khufu or whoever from the Egyptians or Genghis Khan, people remember them, but Genghis Khan is dead. Is he hearing what you're talking about? He doesn't hear you talk about him. You know what I mean? And for the most part, most people have forgotten of who he was. You may have some writings about him and stuff, but that's not going to paint the whole picture. Plus, like I said, he's not here to get those rewards anyways. There's no reward for the dead, and that is often said in this book. There's no reward for the dead. It You live but a short period of time on this planet, and then you're gone. And history will eventually forget most of us, right? It just does. But even if you were alive, you're not going to hear. I mean, being that you're dead, you're never going to hear any praises or negatives anyways. So that's why this book likes to touch on that. Like if you have all these things you want to accomplish, they mean nothing. That's how the book starts out, which is so awesome. Solomon talks about all these great things he did, whether it be buildings that he created, gardens and fields, and just creating this whole society, being a king there, and having women and money and everything you can think of, like a king would have. But that he started to realize, like, even though all he did all these great things, that it was meaningless, and he was a little bit depressed on it, kind of like saying like he hated life because it didn't matter. In so many centuries, those buildings that he made would crumble and they would turn to dust, or they would actually get passed on to somebody else. So all the fruits of his labor would just go to somebody else. And so he realized like a lot of things he was doing were meaningless. The only thing that made it meaningful is living for God. Because once you realize that, like a lot of people haven't, is all these things you're trying to accomplish and do, they're meaningless, that you're trying to do them for yourself. You live a short time. It's just taking up all your time. You're not spending time with probably the people you should. But eventually, you die and you start to realize, like, what is it all for? And you're probably depressed. But if you live for God, right, and you try to do these accomplishments, these things you want to do, then you start to look at it differently and you realize that all of this, all life, your family, your kids, the things that you accomplish, they're all just gifts from God. So you enjoy them because they're gifts from God. It's just a better, more relaxed way to look at life. Like, you know what? I only got a short time here on this planet. I'm going to live it to the fullest. I'm going to love my wife. I'm going to love my kids. I'm going to play with my kids and see my family. And I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to have a good time with this life because I ain't here that long and everything's going to be forgotten anyways. So you're going to live here and you're going to live it good and you're going to live for God. And you realize that all this is just gifts rather than trying to live for yourself because you're just going to pass away and you're going to be lonely because you're going to pass away lonely. Like none of the stuff you did really mattered. It only mattered for that short time. So just understand that life is a gift in itself. And you get to that realization by living for God and following God because we know that when you pass away as a Christian, we know this isn't it. God's gonna see everything you did and he's gonna calculate it up. And so live for God. You're living on the safe side. You're realizing that it's fun. It's better when you live for God. Ecclesiastes 10:15-20. The labor of fools wearies every one of them. Woe to you, land, when your king is a child. Do not curse the king, no, not in your thoughts. Um, this one is a few things here going on here. The labor of fools worries one of them. Like I said, if you're a fool is someone that don't believe in God, and he's basically going to do all these things, and it's just going to wear them out because there's no end to it. If you don't have God in your life, everything is pretty much meaningless because almost everything is meaningless now. But at least living for God, you realize they're gifts, and you live your life differently. It's a philosophy. And then it says, "Woe to the land when your king is a child." That's basically saying, when the leader is immature, like in those days, especially, you would have young kings because a lot of times in different lands, right, kings wouldn't live too long sometimes, and a child would take the place. And if your king didn't have wisdom, he was like a child, the land was going to whatever country it was probably was going to do very poorly, because if your king isn't mature or doesn't have wisdom, then often the land would suffer because of it. And then the last part is, do not curse the king. No, not in your thoughts. You know what? That one right there, I'm kind of like, you don't want to talk bad about the king, or in our day, the president, or anyone, the head of the household. You've done a lot of bad things in your own life, and do you want people to curse you? Because there's times I'm sure you did some people wrong, at least in their eyes. Not We're not all perfect. We all have done some type of bad things in our life, and I don't think we want anyone to curse us in a sense, or talk bad about us. We hope they forgive us. In a sense, that's telling you to do the same. I don't know who it could be. Anybody, like I said, if you're young and you're living with your mom and dad, you want to curse your parents, because if you did anything bad, how would you like it if people cursed you? It's one of those type of things, and so I believe that's where it's kind of um what it's kind of talking about. But let's see what Chatty says. Fools wear themselves out with no purpose. So I'm right there. He talks about what I said, the labor of fools wearies every one of them. Yeah, you have no purpose if you're a fool. Nations suffer under immature leadership, so that answered that other part. And then laziness leads to decay, and careless words can be dangerous. Be wise, diligent, and respectful. Basically, sometimes we get angry because, and it's, Chatty's giving you a better answer than I am, but just don't be careless in your words. If you're cursing a king, talking bad about someone, especially if you talk, because people gossip, and that's part of it too. If you're talking bad about somebody, especially somebody prominent, someone that helps, or anything, leadership. If you're talking, like, let's say at work, you're talking to your coworker and talking about your boss, like, man, what a jerk he is, or man, he ain't very good at his job. What if that gets back to him? Then what? Right? Are you gonna get fired? You're gonna have an awkward situation going on. It's just telling you to watch your words and how you talk and how you think. And not to mention, you do things from time to time too, and you wouldn't want that same action put on you. And then we got 11 through 6. Cast your bread upon the waters. In the morning, sow your seed. Like I said, these are like little pieces cut. I didn't want to write the whole 3 or 4 verses on there. So in this one, there's a part where it says, cast your bread into the waters. The next day it'll be there. And then it says, give to 7, give to 8, basically saying, whether investments or whatever you're doing, be generous, whatever money you make, give to the poor, give to the needy, give to as many. It's just a good thing to be generous when you have stuff. Like, or even when you don't, because even Jesus says, I mean, the point is helping people. Like I said, it eventually comes back to you, and it's one of those things. What do they call that? When you're was it paying it forward? I believe that's the term they used to use. It's just a way of saying that if you're generous in your life, things will come back to you, and it'll be good things. You have like good vibes coming back to you for being generous in your ways. Um, and then it says, in the morning, sow your seed. And that's part of a part above that. The verses talk about basically when the clouds look like it's going to rain, and then say a tree blows over with the wind. um, People will look up at the sky and say, I'm not going to sow today because it's going to rain. Or they'll look at the wind and be like, well, I'm not going to, reap today because of the wind. Basically, people are worried. They look at things and say, you know what, this ain't the time, this ain't the time. And though, it makes sense, obviously, to look at things like, is this the right time to make this investment or not? I think the message here that's trying to be relayed is, just don't wait too long. You know what I mean? Like you got to take risk in your life. That is part of life, and that's the part of fun of life. You take risks, you take shots, you try to live life to its fullest. Because if you're too cautious, then you may have lost out anyways, right? So, and that's all it's trying to say. It's not saying blow all your money or live life recklessly. What it's saying is, don't wait for the perfect time. Sometimes you just got to go and do it. And this happens to us a lot. Like, almost in the opposite direction, but like sometimes we find ourselves very short on money to pay something. And if you think about it too much, it causes a sickness in you, kind of like depression, especially in women. When they have problems, they kind of tend to think about them more often than men do, but they'll think and dwell, 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 and they may get some headaches and other uh sicknesses associated with stress. So, but when the time comes, somehow it always gets figured out anyways. It's either you're not going to pay it and you just live through it and you pay it when you can, or you find a way at the last second, something comes through, you pay it or whatever. The point being is, you can't be too cautious, because when you're too cautious, you just don't live life till its fullest. But it's just telling you, try to be, take a little bit more risk than you probably do. It's more beneficial to you, because you'll probably lose out on a lot more. And I guess if you want to look at it like, if you're going to lose out on a lot more in your life because you're too cautious, than what you would actually lose risking, right? If you risk things in life, you lose things too. But I guess what it's saying is, risking is just more fulfilling because it could either bring better profits. And if you lose, okay, so you lost a little bit. Like I said, you're not being reckless, you're just trying hard. And if you lose a little bit, it's like, okay, but at least you learned something. Remember, that's part of this whole book, is about also learning from mistakes. It's not, this book right here is just not one answer. It's a bunch of answers. It talks about relationships. It talks about times and seasons. It talks about money. It talks about righteous people, wicked people. It talks about all these different things. And so you can start using all these things in different parts of this book, and seeing how it fits in your life, and you put it together. So when you look at the risk, reward, and being too cautious, you start to understand, like the message of basically learning from every incident. That's the whole point. If you don't learn from even your bad times, how is this going to make you better going forward? If you want to be something better going forward, there has to be a prototype, right? When you're like when you're inventing, you have a prototype, and then you make, based off of the prototype, you can make something even better. You'll engineer something even greater, and that's kind of like life. You go through life, and some bad things come in your path, and they stumble you. But if you learn from that, you may never fall back into that situation. Or if you fall into a similar situation, you're going to be better prepared. Now, if you don't learn anything from your mistakes, that's why you fall down the hill. Like I was saying, like you let the river take you, and then who knows where it takes you. Maybe you end up homeless because you don't learn anything from any of the bad things in your life. Like, there's always something to be learned, even through the worst of times, whether it be death, loss of a loved one, losing a career, getting dropped out of school. I don't care, whatever it is, learn, take something from it. You take something from it, it's going to better you and make you better going forward, rather than letting it go and then soaking in your sorrows, right? You start to do that, and then everything just caves in on you and you go nowhere. And what do you end up doing? You grow up to be bitter, and you hate everything. You hate life. You have no sense of purpose. You don't have any of these things because you chose not to try to learn from anything. So what this book tries to teach you is having some resilience. Always at your core have a belief in God, because you need God to help you. You got to help you get through these things, and He helps teach you and give you the wisdom, and also He blesses you, because the more you try to live in His way and do these things, because you're not going to be perfect, you're just not. And this book also, like I said, I kind of almost forgot about that, but there is a line there, and maybe this is the time of the show we'll bring Chatty on. So let me see here. Let me bring Chatty. So can you pronounce that, the Bible again right there? This story, this book of the Bible, is it Eschatolestes?
Absolutely. The book is pronounced Ecclesiastes.
Anyways, Chatty, I'm doing a podcast right now. I'm bringing you on because I'm getting to the end of it, and there's this one part I wanted to talk about. So, there's a part in there where Solomon kind of mentions, like, not living life too wickedly, and don't live life like evilly. And I found it a little, it could just caught me off guard, because everyone always thinks you got to live perfect as a Christian. And I'm not saying don't try to live a good life, but there's a part in the New Testament where I remember Jesus tells this one guy, right, that comes to him and says, "Hey, I've done all these things. What else can I do to inherit the kingdom," or something of that nature. And Jesus says, "If you want to be perfect, give away all your possessions and come follow me." And then that's when the young man cries and he runs away or something. But I always took that story like, what was really being said there was Jesus was trying to this is how I took it, and some people disagree with me, but I felt like Jesus was also saying in that line, like, if you want to be perfect, kind of like, you're doing it, you're doing this all wrong. Like, you're trying to look to be perfect, and being perfect is actually not the message here. The message is yes, there is a way to be perfect, like there's laws, but as a human, don't focus on being perfect. Focus on the Lord and just trying to do the right things and believing Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. Am I wrong on that?
Anthony, you definitely touched on a profound point here. Ecclesiastes and that New Testament story both highlight something really important. The emphasis isn't on achieving some impossible standard of perfection, but on the journey of faith and trusting God. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon acknowledges the complexities and contradictions of life and advises not to be overly righteous or overly wicked. It's a call to balance, wisdom, and humility.
Yeah,
And
and I believe that's so because, like I said, life in general, it's not easy, and there's going to be times where you screw up. And to me, I've always felt in my own heart that God knows that. God knows that it's not easy being a human. I mean, He's the one that told us that we're kind of born of the original sin, and in our minds, we're when we're born, we're like already we're inclined to do like evil things. So He kind of knows like you're not going to be perfect, but that's not really the point of life. The point of life is not wanting to be evil, is wanting to be with God and wanting to have his wisdom and wanting to be saved.
absolutely, Anthony. Life is definitely full of challenges, and it's comforting to remember that God understands our struggles. The journey isn't about perfection, but about striving to be close to God, seeking wisdom and understanding grace. It's all about the heart and the intention behind our actions. And as you said, it's about wanting to be with God and being open to his guidance.
So before we end this, let's learn a little bit about Solomon, who wrote this book. Um, can you tell me some facts about Solomon, like how he became king? What son was he? Can you mention, just some good facts about Solomon that we should know about?
Absolutely. Solomon's story is a fascinating one, and it definitely gives us a lot of context about the wisdom we find in his writings. Solomon was the son of King David and Bathsheba, and he wasn't the oldest son, but he was chosen by David to be his successor. One of the most famous stories about Solomon is that when he became king, he asked God for wisdom instead of riches or long life. God was so pleased with this request that he granted Solomon extraordinary wisdom and also gave him wealth and honor. He's known for building the first temple in Jerusalem, which was a monumental achievement and a central place of worship for Israel. Solomon's reign is often seen as a golden age for the kingdom of Israel, but of prosperity and peace. However, despite his wisdom, Solomon also had his struggles. He had many foreign wives and ended up being led into idolatry in his later years, which caused a lot of problems for the kingdom. But his writings, especially Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, offer timeless wisdom and reflection on the human experience. So Solomon is a figure of great complexity, a wise king, a builder, a poet, and someone who faced the same struggles we all do. His life is a powerful reminder that even the wisest among us can make mistakes, and that returning to God's path is
And,
always possible.
and so what I kind of relate to the audience was how Solomon, even though he had this gift of having God's wisdom, he he was also a man, and because he was a man, he suffered from a lot of things that all men suffer with, which is sins of the flesh. And so yeah, he had great wisdom, but that didn't necessarily mean he was always going to make the right choice. So as followers of Jesus Christ, we know that if Solomon and some of these great figures in the Bible couldn't always live a straight arrow Gennaro, that it was going to be difficult for us too.
Absolutely, Anthony. You really hit on a key point. Even someone like Solomon, blessed with immense wisdom, was still human and susceptible to the same struggles we all face. It's a powerful reminder that faith isn't about never making mistakes, it's about seeking God's guidance, learning from those mistakes, and continuing to weaken faith. And it's encouraging to know that we're not alone in that journey. Every figure in the Bible had their struggles, and yet God's grace and love remain constant.
So, to all you listening out there, like I said, I made this video kind of like I said, I was kind of going through some things, thinking of my own life and like how, we all hit difficult stretches in our lives from time to time, even the people that believe in God the most. And so I made this video. If there's any of you out there just like that, I hope that this, talking about this book gives you some interest in wanting to read it yourself. And just always remember, like, as tough as life can be, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And I think this book is just really great for that message. It really lets you see that, don't think too much about what you do. Live for God's gifts and live for his wisdom and just follow God. And do you have anything to add on that, Chatty?
That's a beautiful message, Anthony. I think you've captured the essence of Ecclesiastes really well. It's all about recognizing that life's challenges and uncertainties are part of the journey, but there's always hope and light when we keep our focus on God's wisdom and his gifts. So whether you're in a tough stretch or feeling uncertain, remember that you're not alone and there's always a reason to keep going. Thanks for sharing your journey with everyone, and I'm sure your listeners will really appreciate your honesty and encouragement.
All right, guys. So till next time, God bless. We're done.
Welcome to theinforminator.net.